This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Did y'all miss me? No, hopefully not. It's only been a week. But it sure does seem like a year since the last time I sat down to record anything. Telling you, man, you get out of that cycle, it's weird when you get back into it. I've been so preoccupied with other stuff. I barely even thought about wrestling in the last 7 days. It's probably been good for my mental state. But, at the same time, I still have an urge to talk about it. It's why the channel still exists. I don't get paid for this. I just like coming on here and detoxing from the real world. It's weird because, technically I'm doing things related to my profession. It's not necessarily what I envision it being. I enjoy the musical aspect of everything I do. The sales rep stuff is genuinely fun. Sometimes frustrating, but there's an art to it. Meeting with people on a daily basis, being social. I've always been pretty introverted, so, it's nice when I get out of my comfort zone occasionally. But it's draining. Doing that for essentially 8 hours for 3 or 4 days in the week. Teaching on the side. All the stuff that I do outside the comfort of my own home. This wrestling stuff ain't bad by comparison. A lot of it pisses me off. But in a good way. And the good news is, the actual library of wrestling material is going to clearly outlive the longevity of this channel. So there's always going to be stuff to talk about. Not saying that I plan on wrapping up anything anytime soon. But, well, you never know. Things can change in the blink of an eye. Especially after all the traveling I've done in the last several days. But welcome, everybody, to the Five Starr Wrestling Report. Typically we're on here for Mondays and Fridays. The next couple of weeks, we actually won't be doing a Friday show because of my hectic schedule. So we'll plan on the Monday show only until the second week of August. Figured that was going to be the case, but, I didn't want to just stop the podcast cold turkey. I had enough wiggle room over the weekend to watch Retro Raw and Retro NXT. So we're going to roll with that. Just like Tom Phillips always says on the NXT shows, the classic Vince trope, Raw rolls on. NXT rolls on. Vince's schlong working its way on the interns rolls on. So with all that, make sure you all subscribe, comment, and like the show for me. You can check us out on YouTube and Rumble, whichever platform you go to these days. Seems like Rumble's slowly catching up to YouTube's popularity. They got a long ways to go, though. Hopefully they don't sell out to corporate censoring. In any case, we'll go ahead and kick things off here with the Retro Raw. And again, just to reiterate, I've taken 1 week off of watching anything wrestling related. Came back from Ohio on Friday morning. I was like, all right, let's try and knock out watching some of these shows. Naturally, I forgot everything that was going on. So I almost went into this one with a blank slate. Even though we literally just reviewed Retro Raw the other week. At least I know what the next pay-per-view is. So we're off to a good start. But we're chugging along in this Raw timeline. The cold open this week was just absolutely grand. And their quote, concerted efforts to promote the WWF Tag Title match for later on. Todd Pettingill managed to completely neuter the challengers Razor and Savio. This is almost a direct quote from Todd's mouth, as he's talking about Savio preparing for this match with Owen and Yoko. The Caribbean sensation may be reaching too high too soon. Way to fucking put over your babyface challengers there, guys. Just immediately downplay them before the bell even rings. So that was a lovely start to the program. Gave me all the reason in the world to have faith that we're going to crown new champions this week. You really want to root behind those babyfaces. So as we opened with a Mabel squash, while I'm also pitying the poor souls that had to carry his fat ass down to the ring on that giant throne, I mainly couldn't get over the fact that Mabel's arms were bigger than my fucking thighs. He was so huge. And not in a healthy way either. I mean, there wasn't much to it aside from me laughing every time the job guy would take a bump and land right on his head. There were several attempted flip bumps here, all of which nearly ended in catastrophe. I mean, I was starting to think this guy was intentionally trying to kill himself. Mabel eventually went over with the belly-to-belly. I'm just going to keep hammering that point home, people. SummerSlam 95, the main event. One of WWF's Big Four pay-per-views of the year. The featured WWF title match on that show was Diesel versus Mabel in the main event. That is how low we've stooped in the year 1995. And there was a part of me that just wished they'd have done Sid versus Diesel best 2 out of 3. That probably would have been slightly less torturous than what we got instead. I also like during this post-match promo, Mabel goes, at SummerSlam, I will be your new World Wrestling Federation champion. And Vince, very casually under his breath, just goes, we'll see. That is when every smart fan in the crowd went, yep. There's no way Vince is putting the belt on this guy. Not a chance. And boy, was it the right call. Vince made a lot of bad decisions over the years. Not making Mabel the WWF champion. That was a wise move. So following that, we had what I would best describe as 2 middle school boys trying to pick a fight in the locker room. You got Shawn Michaels and Jerry Lawler jibber-jabbering back and forth. Lawler's trying to get under Shawn's skin by telling him that he's a marked man as the IC champion. And if Lawler hadn't taken the oath as part of his contractual deal to co-host Raw, he would be first in line to challenge Shawn. Meanwhile, Shawn is making his poor attempts at comedy by referring to Lawler as Kingfish. Yeah, that joke never got over. This whole thing went on for like 3 minutes. I just summarized it as follows. 2 grown men arguing like 15-year-old boys and having a childish dick measuring contest. That's what the whole thing was. Nobody threw a punch. Nobody slapped the other guy in the face. Nobody spat in the other guy's face. Nobody got ball tapped. Of course, neither of them are likable personalities. Lawler's an annoying heel to begin with. Shawn's just annoying, period. So this whole thing sucked. It also made no sense when you think about Lawler's delivery here. I mean, I get he's a heel. Heels lie. But he's talking about how he swore that he would never get physical with the Talon when he is supposed to be a journalist. And I'm like, are we just ignoring the fact that Lawler was literally in the ring wrestling Bret Hart less than 2 months ago? Did we forget about all that? Again, the whole thing was just dumb. So up next we had Bam Bam Bigelow versus Bob Cook. Oh yeah, and Goldust is still coming, by the way. It's reassuring. So anyway, Bam Bam won. The commentators spend most of the match bickering about the previous segment with Jerry and Shawn. Vince also managed to botch the phrase, hypocritical oath. I don't even know what the fuck he was trying to say, but he absolutely butchered it. My favorite part of the segment is right at the very end, as Vince tries to get the King to recap the finish. Lawler's only really able to get out, Bam Bam coming off the top rope with a flying headbutt, and they immediately cut to commercial. I was like, great pitch, guys. Glad that recap came in handy there. Totally worth it. Perhaps they needed to make enough room to fit in another Dean Douglas sketch for the week. Actually, this is pretty great. Douglas actually took on the role of me on this show. He recapped the match we literally just saw, and in doing so, he confirmed that Bam Bam is indeed a beast. Mostly in that he looks like a walrus. And that is why, by way of reason, Douglas was able to positively score Bam Bam's performance this week an F. Now see, this is how we ought to start grading matches in 2024. Instead of these bullshit star rating systems that people get so hung up on. We ought to just go back to letter grades, man. Everybody gets an F for piss-poor performances. Guess we should make a reasonable grading curve for AEW. Elsewise, every match would be an F. This was actually very ahead of its time if you think about it. We need more gimmicks like this in 2024. We need pre-tapes of actual talents making fun of all the goofy, dumb shit the indie marks do. At least that would give me some value in watching more than just the WWE specials. Somebody needs to try and replicate the Dean Douglas report card segments and put that on mainstream television. Maybe it'll give me hope for MJF's career. You know whose career I had no hope for in WWF? Chris Candido. The moment they crafted a storyline where he got beat by Barry Horowitz, that was all she wrote. And now it's an ongoing thing on TV where he and Sonny are out there talking about how it was a fluke. The victory never counted. Because that'll fix the issue, right? You just go out and claim that your undefeated streak was never broken. It worked wonders in WCW, and Sid Vicious kept artificially inflating numbers with his win streak. Back when he was feuding with Goldberg. Remember, the numbers kept going up and down depending on what month it was? So anyway, Skip wrestled Major Yates. And no, I am not making that ring name up. His name was Major Yates. And he did not have an Army General gimmick. They went as far here as giving Yates a couple near-fall teases on Skip. Because that's what you like to see, right? An actual talent with ability having to sell for green job guys who could barely execute arm drags effectively. So they do some stuff. Candido eventually won with a middle rope superplex. And then the heels promised that Barry Horowitz would never embarrass the Body Donnas again. And by that, they mean jobbing out Candido to Horowitz yet again. This time on national pay-per-view. And then following the SummerSlam card update, we come to our WWF Tag Title match. Yokozuna and Owen Hart defending against Razor Ramon and Savio Vega. Or Chevy Vega, as Jim Cornette called him in that pre-tape earlier on. I don't even think I wrote anything down about that segment. It was so short. I know it's only been a week since we last reviewed Raw. I think Yokozuna's gained 172 pounds since then. His hamstrings, dude. I have never in my entire life seen a grown man with duplicate asses until Yokozuna. His legs were so thick, it literally looked like he had a mini ass tucked under his even bigger ass. Fucking vile. So we'll get to the climax point in just a sec. This was one of those multifaceted main events where there was a lot going on. I continue to assert that babyface Imperial Savio is the most unbelievable thing in wrestling. And I do not mean that in a positive way. I mean unbelievable as in implausible. Impossible to buy. It's especially dumb when I see Yokozuna giving the guy a leg drop over the back of the head. The same spot that put away Lex Luger in that tag match at In Your House. Here is just a random spot in the middle of the match. Former main event babyface Lex Luger could not survive Yoko's leg drop of doom. But fucking Savio can. So they eventually do the four-way breakdown. Razor gets in there and tries to run wild for a minute. I did kind of like the double bonk spot with the heels where Owen just kind of ran into Yoko and took a bump. Yoko didn't even budge. At least they paid attention to continuity there. But here is where things get dicey. There's all this mass confusion over who the legal guy is toward the end of the match. So when Hebner sees Razor going for the pin on Owen, he has to reverse the call because JC's throwing a temper tantrum. Trying to get Hebner to realize, dude, Owen wasn't even the legal guy. So Hebner's like, all right, dude, calm the fuck down. I will restart the match. And so they do. Hebner actually sends Corny to the back this time, which, well, he was equally unpleased. I just thought it was funny how Hebner sends Cornette to the back. All the refs are on top of him trying to shove him away from ringside. Meanwhile, there's Fuji standing at ringside with the Japanese flag, just looking around like nothing's wrong. I think even in Hebner's mind, he's like, this guy's barely mobile as it is. What could he possibly do to interfere? He's fine. It's Cornette we need to get rid of. So eventually, after what I believe to be our third commercial break in this one match, the heels are working over Savio. Everybody in the crowd's asleep because, did I mention, babyface in peril Savio Vega fucking sucks. And they end up getting down to the wire as time starts to run down on remaining airtime. And right as Razor's doing the taunt to set up the Razor's Edge, that is when they fade to black and the show ends. I wrote down here, it's like watching a Dynamite main event, except I think this was intentional. The WWF actually meant for this to happen. Because Vince did say here that the match would bleed over into next week if time ran out. So I guess we'll see a part 2 to this. I mean, the action's good. Would ruin the experience for all the goddamn commercial breaks. I mean, there were at least 3 or 4 in this one match alone. I lost count. There was one where they came back for like 30 seconds and then went to another break immediately. It's like, no wonder nobody gives a shit about wrestling anymore. How could you when you're watching the TV product? Half the match is a damn commercial. So yeah, what we saw was fine, but without the definitive ending, there's not much to say about it. I mean, I guess it guarantees that we'll have a little bit of a bump for viewership next week if people actually want to tune in to see a finish. But at least they went on a somewhat high note here. The first half hour of the show is just kind of more of the same when it comes to when we review these shows, man. The squashes are totally meaningless. Right now, they're teasing a title feud between two guys that doesn't actually have a pay-per-view payoff at any point. Like, I don't know if their intent was to maybe do Shawn and the King as a title match for SummerSlam. Maybe politics got in the way of coming up with a reasonable finish there. Because that just seems like a dumpster fire trying to format that decision. Neither guy wanted to put the other over. Maybe that's why they settled on the Razor-Shawn ladder match instead. Whatever the case is, that was kind of the core focus of the show. And I don't think it ever leads to anything. Maybe they wrestle it in your house. I certainly don't remember that match. And then there's all the other feuds going on. Boy, howdy. That Mabel Diesel title program. That's really getting my juices flowing right now. Can't wait for that disaster of a fucking main event. Mabel versus Diesel. Not even done for comedic purposes. They were actually serious about that match. And by they, I mean Vince. And speaking of comedy, dude, when I read that screen cap for NXT this week, and it said, Tyson Kidd challenges Adam Rose to prove that the Exotic Express is a joke. How is that not a rib? I saw that and I was so fucking angry. I'm like, I haven't even clicked the button to start the show and I already hate this. Tyson trying to prove that the Exotic Express is a joke. Well, I'll tell you what. Tyson sure made that mission statement clear. He didn't have to try to prove a goddamn thing. By the time this show was over, my confirmation bias was fully cemented. You know, I didn't mention how we're still like 2 months out from the next takeover. They've got plentiful amount of dead air time to fill. So why not? Why not book Adam Rose and Tyson Kidd in the NXT main event? They've come up with worse ideas. So we officially open with Tyler Breeze and Angelo Dawkins. God, this poor Angelo Dawkins. I mean, I know he eventually found his footing with the Street Profits thing. But how long is that from now? What is it, 4 years? This guy struggled big time in developmental to find his niche. I'm surprised they kept him around as long as they did. Just the idea, visually looking at both guys involved here, the idea that Dawkins versus Breeze is a match booked on paper, and Dawkins is the fucking job guy, the 270-pounder who looks like an actual athlete, that's how you know wrestling's a sham. Nobody in their right mind would ever buy that. Especially not against a dork like Tyler Breeze. Yeah, I know some of y'all like Tyler Breeze. I don't give a shit. I thought he sucked. And them trying to get me to think that he would ever take Angelo Dawkins in a legit fight. What a crock. There was a big editing cut early into this match, too. I don't know if somebody royally botched a spot and they had to take it out, but it was really noticeable. I don't think Dawkins got like 30 seconds of offense in the entire thing. Breeze pretty much kicked his ass from bell to bell, threw him out to the floor, tossed him into the guardrail a handful of times, slid him back in the ring, and hit the beauty shot for the 3. Thanks for coming, Angelo. And then Breeze got on the mic afterwards and let us know that he submitted his music video for an Oscar nomination, which Renee marked out for on commentary. He also poked fun at Neville by having the truck re-air the finish to last week's main event when he cost him the match against Rusev. We had chants of "Thank you, Tyler," after he made the announcement regarding the music video. He's a heel, by the way, in case anybody forgot. Which made it even funnier when he goes, "And I know you all want to see it again." And there's a group of guys in the crowd that pop and go, "Yup, you know it." The internet has completely ruined wrestling. There's no recovery from the damage the dirt sheet sites did to how wrestling fans view it in today's market. The heels are the de facto baby faces. The baby faces are the de facto heels. The psychology is all screwed up. Fans don't even know what draws in wrestling anymore. It's a disaster. So anyway, Neville interrupts. He tells Breeze that he should stop delaying the inevitable and accept a match with him. To which Breeze responded by telling him that Neville was needed back on set for the next scene in The Hobbit. Which then made me realize, holy shit, that movie is 10 years old. I remember seeing the first Hobbit film when it came out in theaters. That was probably the last movie I had any passion to see in theaters before just buying it on DVD. And then Neville made fun of Breeze's mom before both guys got into a fight, and Breeze eventually took off scared. Cannot really say I'm all too enthralled with the Neville-Breeze feud thus far. It is at least more visually believable on paper than Breeze versus Dawkins. At least these two are around the same height and weight. I just hate all the bad scripted verbiage they come up with for the talent. Then they have to go out there and recite it and pretend like it's catchy. It all just sounds so phony. Phonier than them sending JoJo down to NXT to be the Devin replacement. Good God almighty. If you thought Devin sounded scripted and forced, boy, you ain't seen nothing until you hear JoJo deliver lines. I don't even think I could pretend to be this robotic and one-dimensional. She asked Natty what her thoughts are on Adam Rose's return, which is already a fucking stupid question to begin with, because we literally just saw Adam Rose on this show like 1 or 2 weeks ago. So the question doesn't have any merit. And then Nettie has to act all excited about a grown man who goes around sucking on a lollipop and frolics and prances around like a 12-year-old girl. The question, who is the intended audience for this, comes up a lot. I seriously would like an answer when it comes to the circumstance. Who was Adam Rose geared toward? Because it certainly wasn't the male 18 to 34 demo. But hey, he at least had one fan. Maybe two, because Renee likes all the goofy characters on this show as well. So Tyson walked in and explained that Adam Rose is a clown. Fact. He squandered all of his potential on the main roster because he'd rather be a dancing fool than an actual pro wrestler. Fact. And Natty's an idiot for buying into all that crap. Fact. Then we had Charlotte versus Becky Lynch. Becky has now completely dropped the stereotypical Irish jig, and she is now just a poor knockoff version of Lita. It is a vast improvement over the original gimmick, although she's still far from where she'd end up several years later. On the scale of most Divas matches we review, this is one of the better ones we've seen in a while. It was slightly better than average. Charlotte went after Becky's knee. She worked it over for a while. Becky did not make any sort of valiant comeback. And then Charlotte just beat her flat with a natural selection. A fairly one-sided beatdown. A match that about 3 or 4 years later would have set the seats on fire if they did that same finish. It's amazing how time changes perspective on things. And then Mojo did a promo saying he's looking for a partner to compete in this NXT #1 Contenders Tag Team Tournament they're booking. Oh yeah, by the way, forgot to mention that earlier. It is kind of important. So yeah, then Bull Dempsey showed up, told Mojo that he needs a partner. And he also warns him that if Mojo fucks this up for him, then Bull's going to beat his ass. And Mojo complied. They did not appear to butt heads. So just so we're on the same page here, they're trying to put together a tournament of credible challengers to find the Ascension's next opponents for the belts. So the very first team they announce is not only a makeshift pairing, it is also a random oddball babyface heel pairing where evidently we know the team is going to lose, split, and then feud. So far, this tournament is not giving me any signs of hope. I'm thinking the Ascension are not in any real grave danger of losing their titles anytime soon. But maybe that's just me. Speaking of the Devils, they were up next to destroy another random pair of job guys. We'll call them Eggheads number 1 and 2. I do know the one guy was Steve Cutler. And the only reason I know that is because I think he's one of the 3 guys that end up being a part of that Forgotten Sons geek faction that never got over. Remember those dorks? Steve Cutler, the other generic-looking guy I can never remember offhand. I think, wasn't Gunner in that group? Remember Gunner from TNA? Good fucking Lord. There's so much crap that's yet to come on this show that I have completely wiped from memory. I vaguely remember the Forgotten Sons gimmick because it was kind of a running gag in NXT for years. Everybody hated that group, including the people that had to write for them. And it took like 6 years for them to finally do away with it. And then naturally, everybody forgot about them. Ironic, huh? So anyway, the Ascension won with a fall of man. And then they got on the stick and buried the whole concept of the tag tournament, saying that we all know how it's going to end. Total annihilation. See what they did there? They're crafty meatheads. Then we had Mojo, Rawley, and Bull Dempsey in a tune-up match of sorts, I guess you could call it. They teamed up to face, not making this name up, by the way. I had totally forgotten they ran with this before they became the Revival. Cash Wheeler and Dax Harwood wrestling as the Mechanics. The Mechanics. Right. Because, you know, they were all about mechanics and basics. They did a lot of holds. They were gritty, old-fashioned grapplers. The Mechanics. Glad that name didn't stick, because it blew. As did the ring names Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder. I'm going to have to get used to that, too. I've been so used to calling them Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler all these years. I forgot that WWE gave them a completely different set of goofy names. They were still the FTR we came to know and love. Just took a little more seasoning for them to click and get over with the audience. I forgot that Dax is out with a leg injury for the last 7 months. Remember, they were doing stuff with him and Rusev back when they were pushing the Legionnaires on TV. They were a recurring team. And just like that, Dawson was gone with the injury. You know, it sucks they couldn't give him more time here, but you know, Dawson and Wilder were just enhancement talent even by this point. The pairing that actually looked like a legit tag team with matching gear and everything. Of course, they were the ones getting jobbed out to the unlikely duo. I get it, though. You know, they're trying to establish the story with Mojo and Bull ahead of the tournament. Can they work together? Can they get on the same page? They really didn't do much here aside from hitting all their big moves. They cooperated, but nothing to really indicate they were going to break up in round 1. So who knows? Maybe they'll actually go the distance. Maybe we'll end up seeing The Ascension versus Bull Dempsey and Mojo Rawley for the NXT tag titles at the next takeover. Could you imagine? I can't. So then Bayley had an interview with that rich guy. Not rich as in wealthy. I mean the former broadcast guy rich, whose name I can never remember. Yeah, that guy interviewed Bayley. She talked about beating Charlotte a few weeks ago. Said she's glad the BFFs are done and over with. And then Charlotte waltzed into the room and sounded about as genuine as a get-well card from an Undertaker, telling Bayley to keep her mouth shut and not mention Charlotte's name again. And then Bayley had to stand there and act all scorned. Maybe it's a delivery thing. The authenticity of it. Maybe it's tonality. Why do the girls always sound even faker and more ridiculous than the guys do? Is it just me? There's never been a Divas segment on NXT programming where when it's over, I'm like, I totally believe everything those girls just said. At least with the guys, it's sort of a fake it till you make it kind of situation. I know they're at least trying. The girls, dude, they sound so overly rehearsed. Or maybe it's just Charlotte. Because it's Charlotte. And then we get our main event. In what universe this would ever quantify as a main event, I have no idea. But it's Tyson Kidd versus Adam Rose. The test to see whether or not Adam Rose is a complete joke, as Tyson alluded to earlier in the program. I think the real test is trying to discern whether or not Adam Rose would be permitted around young children in public spaces. Any grown adult man that offers lollipops to kids, avoid those individuals like the plague. Especially when said lollipops are pulled from the guy's underpants. Those are not the kinds of suckers I want to be sticking in my mouth. No, sir. And it's really unfortunate, too, because remove all the goofiness with Adam Rose. The actual match itself wasn't bad. As always, these main events tend to go on way too long. But it wasn't boring. Tyson spent a while getting the heat on Rose after all the lollipop shenanigans and whatever that was supposed to be. But it got serious. Rose made his big comeback toward the finish. Tyson tried to cut him off and mock him with the sucker gimmick. And then Rose rolled him up and pinned him. But that was mainly Tyson's fault for looking at Natty and distracting himself for too long. So it's another one of those things where he's all dejected post-match. Natalia's trying to be the sympathetic wife, but Tyson's being a sore loser. I mean, that was basically all they showed before they ended the program. I'm not really sure how this is doing Tyson any favors ahead of the TakeOver special. Jobbing him out to Adam Rose. But it's all continuation in this Tyson Kidd-Natalia marriage drama, which is kind of starting to run its course by now. I mean, I think we stretched out this thing as long as we can go without needing some kind of actual payoff. Are they going to divorce each other on TV? Are they finally going to have a blow-up? I don't know. But some needs to eventually happen, because I'm kind of sick of seeing butthurt, dejected Tyson Kidd every week, where he has to walk around and be all mopey. Like it was fine for the first month or two. Now it's just sort of repetitive and dry. He's a mentally abusive dick to his wife. We get it. Time to advance the plot, guys. Ta-ta-ta today, Junior. I mean, on the one hand, it is kind of interesting how all the main event guys have their own thing going on right now. We're not exactly at the point where they have Neville, Kidd, Breeze, and Zayn interacting all in the same segment. But we have established who the four core guys are, to some degree. At least they're advancing some stuff in the tag division. That's progress. Although not much. It was better than last week's show. I will give it that. Standards aren't high to begin with. But I'll take a show like this over whatever in the fuck they dished out the other week. 'Cause God, that was brutal. But on that note, we're going to wrap it up here. The neighbors are getting really rowdy. And, now there really wasn't much to talk about this week. It was a shorter show. There will not be a Friday show again this week. Just want to keep that on everybody's radar. We do have a couple SummerSlam pay-per-views coming up. That'll be part of the Monday podcast. We'll get back to normalcy in a couple weeks. But right now I just got to keep things moderately tame on the channel while I attend to other important matter. So, thanks everybody for watching. And we'll stay in touch. Take care. Peace out.